This is a very different kind of video. A few years ago, I had the idea of making a video game storytime game, which would tell the story of the life of Satoru Iwata in an interactive platforming experience. For reasons I'll get into later, I didn't end up finishing the project, but the demo that I created, which is admittedly a little bit rough around the edges, is available to play. Somebody though once suggested that a playthrough of the game would be a fairly good video essay in and of itself, and as such I've decided to present it to you in this form now. I hope that you'll be patient with this, as it is very much an early build of what I had in mind, and things slow down a little bit and are a little bit laggy at times, and not everything is absolutely perfect in how I would want it to be. Nevertheless, hopefully this gives you some insight into the life of Satoru Iwata, and if you stick around to the end, I'll explain a little bit about the project and why I ended up not going through with completing it. This is a rare opportunity to do a video game storytime about a video game storytime game, and I can't really pass that up. First though, before showing off the game itself, this video was possible thanks to our sponsor, Boot.dev. Here at Video Game Storytime, we're actually very picky about which sponsors we work with, and we turn down the vast majority of offers that we receive. So it is significant that when Boot.dev came to us and said they wanted to sponsor a second video, we leapt at the chance to work with them again. Satoru Iwata was an excellent business leader, but as this video will hint at, he was first famously a legendary programmer. If you've ever wished to follow in Iwata's footsteps, I genuinely think that Boot.dev is a brilliant service that will help you to level up your coding skills. Boot.dev is a learning platform that teaches you back-end web development from start to finish in both the Python and Go programming languages. What I love about this service is how it gamifies the learning process with the kinds of mechanics that you'd see in a role-playing game. You'll stay motivated and excited by earning experience points, completing quests, leveling up and earning achievements, and you'll be able to see your progress on a global leaderboard. There are even bi-monthly boss fights where the community comes together to earn extra XP. It's such a smart way of making the learning process fun and engaging, something that keeps you going even at a point where other more traditional learning platforms may feel a little bit dry. I also love how the lessons are taught through interactive practice, building real projects, where you'll get hands-on experience so that you can be sure you're not just covering the theory, but you're actually understanding exactly how to apply lessons in context. If any of this sounds like it's right up your alley, Boot.dev's lessons are all free to watch in guest mode. What's more, using the promo code Video Game Storytime will get you 25% off an annual plan, which will give you access to all of the neat interactive learning tools. Check out Boot.dev today and follow in Satoru Iwata's incredible coding footsteps. With all of that said then, how did Satoru Iwata first start making games? Well, it involved a calculator.
It all started with a calculator and a volleyball. The calculator was not just any calculator. It was the Hewlett-Packard HP 67, one of the world's first programmable pocket calculators. It was a beautiful, beautiful device, and Satoru Iwata wanted it more than anything else in the whole world. While Iwata had played with computers in a public setting, the idea of owning a personal computer was still several years away from becoming a reality. The HP 67 was the next best thing. Iwata saved every penny he could to buy the calculator, working as a dishwasher in his spare time to save up cash. When this still wasn't enough to earn him the calculator, his father, Hiroshi Iwata, stepped in to help, paying the remaining money. Iwata's school, Sapporo South High School, was not an ordinary school. There was no uniform, a rarity in Japan at the time, and students were encouraged to embrace autonomous study. There was an atmosphere of self-directed learning, and this suited Iwata perfectly. He had a good head for numbers and a hunger to understand how the world worked, to absorb as much information as possible. Iwata's friend and colleague, Shigeru Miyamoto, described this by saying, "It wasn't so much a drive to learn as an enjoyment of the learning process." Iwata was also tall, and he was a big fan of jumping. Naturally, he gravitated towards the school's volleyball team. There, he discovered something that would change his outlook on life. There were some things he realised that he couldn't do all by himself. No matter how good he got at playing volleyball, he couldn't win matches without his team. So, in an effort to put his new calculator to good use, Iwata began bringing it to volleyball practices. He would input data from games to spot patterns that might help his team improve. He also saw another use for his pocket calculator. Yes, it could be used to track his teammates' statistics. It could be used to analyse volleyball. It could also be used to play volleyball. At least, it could after Iwata had done with it. Iwata designed a simple volleyball computer game. It required a little imagination. After all, the calculator screen only featured a single line of digits, but Iwata was pleased with it. He shared this game with his fellow classmates, including one boy, Hirofumi Yura, who also sat next to him in some classes. Yura was a receptive playtester, and soon Iwata was inspired to create something far more complex. His magnum opus was a calculator game based on the popular American science fiction show Star Trek. The player could venture out into space, firing missiles at enemy Klingons. The HP-67 could store data on external magnetic cards. Iwata's Star Trek game filled 6 such cards, and Yura loved it. Iwata later said, "As human beings, unless we have someone to complement our work and enjoy what we've created, we're not apt to go out on a limb." Which is why meeting this friend in high school had such a positive effect on the course of my life. Iwata and Yura eventually began working on a baseball game together for Iwata's calculator. They both talked about moving to Tokyo together after graduation to develop games full-time. Only one of them would make professional game development a career. Iwata stayed in contact with his volleyball teammates for the rest of his life, and when his schedule and his health permitted, he joined them at reunions. Thus, even while in high school, Iwata was already beginning to develop the 2 skills that would define his life: a passion for learning and experimentation, and the wisdom to collaborate with others as part of a team. Iwata didn't know it yet, but in time, these skills would help him to save the world. Well, the world of video games anyway.
That then was Satoru Iwata Saves the World Chapter 1, which at one point I thought was going to be my magnum opus. But unfortunately there were 2 things that got in the way of that. One of them very much related to a piece of feedback that I received on the game, and the second one relates to a particular problem that I struggle with in a lot of aspects of my life. First things first, I'm more of a storyteller than a game developer, which is very clear from my body of work up till this point. But I had the idea that I wanted to make a game, because if you're constantly making videos about the game development process, eventually you start to get that game development bug yourself. It was and continues to be very clear that the perfect kind of game for me to develop is one that has a very strong story, because I love telling stories. But I also love playing 2D platformers. 2D more so than 3D, and I think that is very much a reflection of the era in which I was born and the kinds of games that I played when I was a child. The thing about a 2D game is you don't need your higher brain function for it. It's all in reflexes. It's all in the process of reacting fast to what's going on in front of you. And so it's possible for me to, for example, listen to a podcast or even have the television on in the background while I'm playing a 2D platformer. And I thought to myself, what if there was something that could be done while the brain was engaging in that lower level of the fast reaction times to then provide the narrative on top of that? What if, for example, Brett and Stripes were to tell a story while the player is engaged in the actual meat and potatoes of playing the game? I still think it's a great idea, and it's something that I would like to come back to, but we'll get to why I haven't in a little while. So I made this demo and I sent it out to a few of the people that I trust most in all of the world in order to get their initial feedback. And most people said, oh yeah, that's quite nice, I like that, or yeah, that's cute. And then one person said something which I'm not going to quote exactly, but it was something to the degree of that it made them very uncomfortable. The idea of playing a game that was based on Satoru Iwata's life, where you control Satoru Iwata like a little puppet. And he said that that just didn't feel respectful to this man. And I thought about it for a while, and it hadn't been my intention to do anything that was in any way disrespectful. But I put up a poll, I think, on the community tab for this YouTube channel, just asking, would people find this uncomfortable? And 10% of people said that yes, that was just a little bit not quite right. And because of that, I felt like I really needed to rethink the entire thing. And so I stopped working on it and put it to one side. I didn't really know what to do with it for a while, and then eventually just kind of dumped it out on itch.io without very much fanfare. And it's just been left there ever since. I don't feel like my time with this was wasted, because I learned an awful lot about the game development process. This was my very first project that I'd worked on. I then went and moved on and did a bunch of other things. I've done some game jams, and I've taken the time to figure out the kinds of games that I like to make best. So I put this thing out of my mind because ultimately it had just been a little bit of an experiment, and it was only this week that I came back to look at it again. And I booted it up and I turned on the game and I gave it a little play, and I realized I've made something here that I'm incredibly proud of. Like, I worked really hard on this. Yes, it's rough around the edges. I don't think the idea of having all of the text surround the player really works as well as I thought it would. And some places it looks like there's a clipping issue with some of the textures, but actually what's going on is I had this idea of how it was going to look that it doesn't quite live up to. And obviously there's some slowdown. I don't think that all of the jumping mechanics work quite as I had intended them to. I think that actually developing a 2D platform is probably not something that I am well suited to, because I love the story rather than the mechanics of this kind of game design. But even so, playing this thing again and rediscovering what I had made here, I thought I made something special that I enjoyed, that I really liked, and that I want to finally have the chance to properly share with everybody. And for that reason, here it is, and I'd be very interested to hear all of the feedback that you happen to have on this, what you think of this, and whether or not there's anything in here that you would like to see more of. But ultimately, there is a second reason why I didn't finish this game, and I do think it's really important to talk about this. I am not good at finishing things. I am really good at starting projects. I absolutely love the thrill and the enjoyment of starting something and of looking at a blank piece of paper and imagining what is going to be on it when I am done. What I am less good at doing is carrying on when you get to the final stages of something, where all of that initial burst of creativity is over and you've got to look at the mechanics of actually putting in the UI, or you've got to tighten things and just sit there for hours just staring at a screen and figuring out all of the little minutiae that actually make something a finished product. I'm tremendously impressed with a friend of mine who recently completed a game that he had been working on for several years, during which I had been working on my game at the same time, and ultimately had put mine to one side and worked on 4 or 5 other different projects. And he just kept going with this one same game project over the course of multiple years, and now he's finished it. And I just look at that and I think, how do you do that? Because I cannot finish a thing to save my life. I get partway through a project and I ultimately think, oh, but what if I did this instead? And I go off in a completely different direction. The only things that I ever feel like I've completely finished in my life are things where it's been incremental, where I've done, for example, a webcomic and told a complete story over the course of several years because I've been doing it page by page and sharing each page as I go. If I'd had to sit down and do an entire book without sharing it with anybody, where the entire thing was just one big book, then I wouldn't have finished it. And I know that because after putting the Satoru Iwata project to one side, I started writing a book about Shigeru Miyamoto, and I thought I will do the most comprehensive biography of Shigeru Miyamoto that has ever been written in English. And you've seen 2 chapters of that already in video form, because I got a decent chunk of the way through this book and then lost interest and wanted to do something else and never actually finished it. And then came back to it and thought, okay, actually, if I carve this up, this will be some pretty good video script. I don't know, maybe, hopefully, if I keep putting out videos on the life of Shigeru Miyamoto, eventually I will be able to add up all of those videos into a book. Whether or not anybody will be interested in reading it when they've already seen all the YouTube videos remains to be seen, but then at least, hopefully, I will have made a thing and I can say that this is complete. I think, though, having given it some thought, I don't necessarily regret all of my half-finished ideas and projects, because I've learned from each of them. And to a certain degree, I feel like I've learned an awful lot more from doing all of these little projects and getting halfway through and starting something else than I would have done if I had just worked on one thing all the way through to completion and then put that to one side. I mean, I've learned a lot, except for how to finish a project, but that's beside the point. The moral of this story is that it's okay to leave things unfinished. It's okay to do something for a while and then put it down and say, I'm going to do something else now. Because no, you're not going to get the same kind of experience as, say, somebody who's made a game like Mind Over Magnet, but you are going to have a lot of opportunities to learn different things and to develop and to grow and to discover the things that interest you and the kinds of things that you like to make and the kinds of things that you want to do with your life. You don't have to pick one specific skill set and just stick with that throughout your entire life. You can jump around, you can learn art for a while, and music for a while, and computer coding for a while, and jiu-jitsu for a while, and long distance running for a while. This world is so full of so many different things that you could possibly do with your life. You don't need to be locked down into just doing one thing forever. At least that's my experience, as somebody who absolutely adores flitting very quickly between multiple different hobbies. I recommend and I encourage you to try out a bunch of different things, because you're only alive once, and there are so many different things that you could try that it's okay if you don't become the best in the world at any one given thing. So long as you're having a good time, you're enjoying yourself, and you're trying your best. That is the moral of this video. This has been a lot more personal than most of our videos, and I hope that you are patient with that. I appreciate you watching to the end of this. Thank you very much.